Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the conviction of the neo-Nazi extremist who murdered the MP Jo Cox has thrown the spotlight on the UK's far-right supporters. Thomas Mayer's obsession with violent white nationalism has raised questions about whether we've been underestimating the scale of the threat from the extreme right. Well, I'm joined by Chip Chapman. He's the former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, and we can also speak to Ross Frennett, whose company works to counter violent extremism using technology. Very good afternoon to both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Ross, if I can start with you, Ross Frennett. Is it your understanding, your feeling that we are underestimating the rise of the right-wing extremists?
Broadly speaking, yes. It's been an area that in the media and to some extent policy has been underestimated, and occasionally there's been a false convergence drawn between far-right populism and far-right terrorism. And as the verdict yesterday showed, far-right terrorism is alive and well, and is something that we need to take very seriously, both in this country and throughout Europe.
Well, just picking up on that point, is there a feeling, though, that people like Thomas Mayer, who was convicted yesterday of Jo Cox's murder, were sort of feeling emboldened by the rise of more populist right-wing extreme views, and it can, therefore, is there perhaps a link between the more populist right-wing extreme views and people carrying out more extremist acts like this?
I mean, there's possibly a conversation to be had around the general environment, but it's also important for us to remember that the largest far-right terrorist attack in the last 10 years was carried out by Anders Breivik in 2011, before the rise of the kind of populism we've seen in the last few years. So it's important for us to not overstate that link. While there is a conversation to be had around the general environment, far-right terrorism has been with us for quite some time. And needs to be taken seriously.
Chip Chapman, how concerned are you about the rise of neo-Nazism? You know, we were hearing reports yesterday that they equate and they equal the number of religious extremists in this country now.
That's not true, and broadly speaking, the answer is no. The counter-extremist strategy of the government was only promulgated in October 2015. It was a counter-extremist strategy, not a counter-Islamist strategy, and it goes into great detail about the far-right impact and the far-right threat. Of course, in the hierarchy of threats, at the top one, you've got jihadist terrorism. Secondly, you've got separatist terrorism. So there were 211 failed, foiled, or completed attacks in Europe in 2015. 103 of those were actually in Northern Ireland, so that's the separatist terrorism. The right-wing terrorism is the outlier in all of these. That doesn't mean we should be complacent about these. And of course, we arrested 280 people in 2015 for terrorist-related incidents. 79% of those were for international terrorist acts. The other 21 were things like right-wing extremists and animal rights. And
do you think we are being complacent, just to be clear? You don't think it's the biggest threat, but do you think there's a risk that we're not taking any notice of it at the moment?
No, because of course the counter-extremism strategy had various things that were going to be implemented by the police and the population, looking at the data which would come, for example, from hate crimes, and it's quite specific on the number of hate crimes in 2014, for example, which were far too many, of course. There were 52,500. But you need that data in the future, the area that Ross goes into, look at any solutions to this. One thing you can say about right-wing extremism, putting Breivik aside, is it really is an outlier. It doesn't actually kill many people. Across the period 2000 to 2014, right-wing extremists in Europe only killed an average of 1.22 people and injured 2.13 because they use minimal means. It's either a lone gun, pistol, or some sort of blade. It is not high-end bombing terrorists as we see from Islamic extremists.
And Ross Frennett, picking up on that then, would you agree that it tends to be lone wolf and therefore less destructive?
I mean, no, I don't particularly want to get into a back and forth as we're all on the same page,
Sure.
but to say if we put Anders Breivik aside, is to take the most significant issue of far-right terrorism we've seen and put it to one side. Also, in terms of numbers of deaths versus numbers of attacks, the first figure quoted around separatism was number of attacks rather than numbers of deaths. But I don't particularly want to get into an argument about which is the greater threat. We all agree it is a threat, and I think we need to focus now on what we can do to counter this threat. And there's actually a huge amount we can do in the online space in particular, where we know Thomas Mayer was very active, to counter far-right terrorism, and those same methods will work for the other kinds of terrorism we're discussing. So rather than getting into that kind of back and forth, we can agree it's a problem, and let's start talking about some of the solutions we can enact, in particular in the online space.
Okay, I take your point, Ross Frennett. I mean, you're talking about the online space. I mean, how far can you go in terms of prevention? We know that it's almost impossible when it comes to the internet to identify the sources of many of these incidents.
I mean, that's actually not true, and this is one of the areas that my organisation spends a huge amount of time and effort looking at. Is we know that there are signs, and Thomas Mayer left them and others left them, when individuals are radicalising, that are left online, whether it's search patterns, whether it's pages liked, whether it's social media accounts engaged with. And what we need to do is move towards a situation whereby we replicate what extremists themselves do. We know that extremists look for vulnerable people online and then engage one-to-one in a peer-to-peer conversation with those people to bring them into extremist organizations. We have started to pilot methodologies to do the exact same thing on our side, whereby we're identifying people at risk of joining terrorist organizations, and then we're starting conversations with trained professionals with those individuals to steer them away. And there's a huge amount of potential in that approach, and a massive amount we can do. This recent terrorist attack highlights the issue of the far right, but those same methods can also be used to pause jihadist extremism and also separatist extremism. So it's a much broader conversation around a lot of unoccupied space in the online area.
Chip Chapman, would you agree with that? Do you think the Ministry of Defence has some work to do when it comes to online? GCHQ, for example, leading the way in all of this?
Well, Ross and I are violently agreeing. In fact, one of the things which dribbled through Parliament last week was the Investigatory Powers Act. And of course, this gives GCHQ and other agencies bulk collection of all the sort of data that we're talking about. So both data and metadata are there to be collected and for those signs of extremism to be picked up on. So there's both this privacy and security thing, which is now being passed in legislation last week. And as I said, it's dribbled through. You can do a lot in this space, and you can, obviously, we want to preempt these things from happening, and we're pretty good generally about doing this. It is these lone actors which are more difficult to track than coherent groups who try and manipulate and communicate and plot as a large entity.
Ross Frennett, we've talked about the online space. What about the grassroots? What's the cause of this increase in hatred and intolerance? We're seeing it in Germany, we're seeing it in the States, and now, unfortunately, in the case of Thomas Mayer, here in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, separating the online space from the grassroots is possibly not the best way of thinking about it. Because we're seeing every single time there's a terrorist attack, whether it's a separatist attack, jihadist, or far right, as in the case with Thomas Mayer, the internet is playing a crucial role. And it's playing a crucial role in terrorism because it plays a crucial role in everything else that we do. So there's a problem in the online space in particular around echo chambers and around the ability of these organizations to sustain themselves in a way they couldn't previously have, because there's self-reinforcing mechanisms that if there was a group of 15 people spread across the UK 20 years ago, they couldn't have stayed in contact. These days they can encourage each other, nurture each other, and do things of that nature. And that's what we need to learn from. I mean, what was just being discussed was around intelligence. One of the things we want to focus on is how we can use non-coercive methods to actually pierce those echo chambers and change behavior both online and offline, using the same kind of techniques that are used by counselors, the same kind of techniques that are used by marketers. There's a huge amount of unoccupied space in the online area, and if you want proof that online activity can lead to offline activity, look at every terrorist attack we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. There's been some form of online communication there, and very often that's linked to offline. So we just need to take that and turn it on its head so that we're proactively reaching people online and actually engaging more actively in that battle of ideas.
Okay, I mean, Chip Chapman, I almost want to separate the internet from the grassroots. I totally take your point, Russ Frennett, that they are also inextricably linked. But in this instance, I want to talk about why, just in public discourse, perhaps in the media, we are seeing the rise, and I know we don't want to conflate the two issues, but we are seeing the rise of populist right-wing views being held, which many people say are emboldening those extremists.
Well, you can have poor attitudes or bad attitudes which we wouldn't like in the normal world, to do with the rule of law and democracy and all those sorts of things. But attitudes and behaviours are two different things. And of course, it's stopping, certainly in the work I was doing, it's stopping people going into the behaviours where they're likely to kill people, which is the most important thing. Now, we know in the sort of Twitter sphere for the jihadist groups that we've taken down 250,000 websites and things like that in the last sort of 6 months. And of course, that sort of space is not occupied in the way it was by IS now. Now, the counter-extremism strategy does go into the number of hits for various far-right groups in the strategy. So it's going to be out there. You can be chasing the error all the times, but it really is changing people's attitudes from going into these bad behaviours which lead to terrorist activity. And of course, terrorist activity is based on either a political, religious or ideological mindset, and it's altering those so they live in this sort of liberal democracy that we all cherish in the UK.
Okay, a final word from both of you. Chip, if I can start with you. Do you think, finally, yes or no, we're doing enough and we're taking seriously enough the threat from the far right?
It's proportionate.
Same to you, Ross.
That's yes.
Not enough is being done, but the good news is there's a lot more that we can be doing to counter these kinds of individuals and groups. So there's a lot of unoccupied space that we need to be focusing on and moving into.
More than one word, you're cheating, but I take your point. Russ Frennett, Chip Chapman, thank you both very much indeed for your time this afternoon.
I've been getting away with it all